Over on Jaguar Gator 8, a new college football video is out. In this video, we talk about a 1990 broadcasting controversy involving CBS, Alabama, Georgia, the Boston Red Sox, and the New York Yankees. Click the card in the upper right corner to watch. And now, on with our feature presentation. There are certain territories and markets in the country that, even though they're not technically the home market of the team, you don't have to ask twice to find out what team is supported most in that city. As an example, even though no city in Oklahoma is a secondary market of the Dallas Cowboys, you know for a fact that Oklahoma is Cowboys country, and that the Cowboys are the de facto local team. The same thing goes with Arkansas. No, Arkansas doesn't have an NFL team, but the Cowboys are their NFL team, and you'd be crazy to think otherwise. With Kansas, even though the Chiefs play in Missouri, the Kansas City Chiefs are the most popular team in the state by a fairly healthy margin. With Oregon, the Seattle Seahawks are far and away the most popular team in the state. You get the idea. You don't need to test this theory out and decide to enrage the state and the market to reach your conclusion. It's just common sense. However, in 1981, some absolute genius at WTVR, Channel 6, one of the CBS affiliates, decided, hey, you know what? What if we decided to test this theory out and not show the team that we've been calling our local team this whole time? How would people react? You could have told someone that you're going to destroy their house with a wrecking ball within the next 5 seconds. And honestly, the reaction they would have given wouldn't be as bad and as severe as the reaction that fans in this market gave in 1981 when one man with way too much power decided to try an experiment, impacting the thousands of people in the market in the process. Because in 1981, the city of Richmond, Virginia, which is just 2 hours away from Washington, D.C., and has always been Washington's home territory, as they are the most popular team in the city and in the state of Virginia by a country mile, was not able to watch their team play against the Chicago Bears. Because one man had a crazy theory that Richmond didn't necessarily care about the team. And the reaction was so bad that he immediately had to reverse course. This is the story behind one of the dumbest broadcasting controversies of the entire 1981 season. Before I talk about what WTVR decided to do and the reaction that came from it, we need some context to understand what prompted the decision in the first place. The year is 1981, and not a lot of people have high hopes for Washington. After a disappointing 1980 season where they went 6-10, where head coach Jack Party was fired at the end of the year, there was a new man in charge in 1981 by the name of Joe Gibbs. He was going to have to find a way to right the ship and turn around a team that finished with the 4th worst offense in all of football the year before, got shut out twice, and turned the ball over in every single game. People knew that Washington was going to be bad. No one had high hopes for them, especially in the stacked division known as the NFC East, which had both of the NFC finalists the year before in the Dallas Cowboys and the Philadelphia Eagles. But I don't think anyone expected them to be this bad, because through the first 5 games of the season, they were absolutely putrid, to the point where they were downright unwatchable. Through the first 5 weeks, Washington was sitting dead last in the NFL with an 0-5 record, being the only winless team through 5 games. They had been outscored by a whopping 72 points, which was the worst point differential in football, and came out to over 14 points per game, meaning that since the 2-point conversion did not exist back then, on average, they were losing by 3 possessions a game. They already had multiple games, a 26-10 loss to the Dallas Cowboys and a 30-17 loss to the San Francisco 49ers, where they turned it over 6 times. They had multiple turnovers in every game, and they had 21 turnovers total, which comes out to over 4 turnovers per game, or more than 1 turnover per quarter. And in one particular game against the Philadelphia Eagles, they were actually only down 14-13 at one point in the 4th quarter, which is a valiant effort going up against the defending NFC champions. Philly then proceeded to rattle off 22 straight points to win 36-13. It was that kind of season. Through 5 weeks, their season was over. Any chance they had at making it to the playoffs was seemingly shot. And I say seemingly shot and not completely shot because if you know how Washington ended that 1981 season, the hot streak that they went on, and how that set the framework for an incredible era of football under Joe Gibbs, then you know what I'm talking about. But regardless, at 0-5, no one had any hope at the time. The team was terrible in just about every way, because when you're winless and you have the worst defense in the NFL, allowing 149 points for an average of just under 30 points per game, no one's exactly looking forward to watching your games. And stuck watching Washington play all these games were the people of Richmond, Virginia. Now, Richmond has always been Washington territory. The city's relatively close to DC, to the point where many season ticket holders are from Richmond. And it also helped that during the 70s, when the league really began to explode on television, Washington was usually good and competitive. So a lot of people, especially in that area, latched onto them as their team. But WTVR, the CBS affiliate in Richmond, was wondering just how much interest there truly was in the team, especially since they were 0-5 and looked inept, especially since all of their games were decided by double digits, and especially since their next game in Week 6 was against the almost equally bad Chicago Bears, who were 1-4, meaning that this game, which you're watching highlights of right now, was about the least attractive matchup possible. And with that, John Shand, the vice president and the station manager at WTVR, had an idea. What if we tested out this theory for ourselves? What if we truly got an idea of the pulse of the city and didn't necessarily force Richmond to watch Washington play? On one hand, this seems like a decent idea. You want to make sure as a station manager that you have the pulse of your city and your market so you can increase viewership however you can. And who knows? Even though it seems very obvious that Richmond is Washington territory, maybe the only reason they are is because you forced them to be against your will. It's almost like how a big tradition around Christmas time is to watch the Frosty the Snowman TV special from the 1960s on CBS. Even though when you step back, you're like, hey, wait a second. We're only doing this because you force-fed this to us down our throats every year. The special actually kind of stinks. So that's what John Shand was going to do. He was going to poll the residents of the city and ask their thoughts, and see whether or not WTVR should televise Washington's Week 6 game against Chicago. At least, that's what you think he would do in this situation. Because what actually wound up happening was that Shand, in order to get his way and test things out, set up the worst, most biased, most misleading poll ever. Because the station called up people throughout Richmond and asked them, which team would you rather watch, the Atlanta Falcons or the Dallas Cowboys? You might have noticed something horribly wrong with that poll. Yeah, instead of asking what team you want to watch and leaving it open-ended, you only gave people two options. You made it binary for no real reason. That's like if I put out a poll and asked people what flavor of ice cream they prefer, chocolate or strawberry, and more people respond with chocolate. So I conclude that chocolate is the most popular flavor of ice cream. Even though that's not true, since a lot of people probably would have said vanilla if you gave that as an option, or left it open-ended. Not having Washington as a poll option was a deliberate choice, especially since this was the only public opinion poll that was done. And number two, the poll makes no sense, because CBS had the doubleheader that week, and the Falcons and the Cowboys were playing at two completely different times. The Falcons were playing the Los Angeles Rams at 1 o'clock, and the Cowboys were playing the San Francisco 49ers at 4 o'clock. So it's not even like you had to choose between the two games. It's like if I ask you if you want to come over to watch the NFL game this Sunday, and you say that you can't because you're going to stay home and watch the Daytona 500. Like, you don't have to choose between the two. They don't overlap. How does this make any sense? So not only are you leading an intentionally screwy poll, but you're leading a poll that doesn't even make any sense. Because not only are you making something a binary choice, but you're making people choose between two things that they don't even have to choose between. Naturally, when Shand collected the results from this awful poll, he came to the conclusion that people wanted to watch the Falcons at 1 o'clock and the Cowboys at 4 o'clock, since he got responses for both of those teams. Makes total sense why he thought that, seeing as he only gave the people two options, and never stopped to consider that they would want to watch the local team. As Shand said, I know I'll get some condemnation, but judging by the many calls, there's great interest in the Falcons here. What do you mean judging from the many calls? You called them. You could have looked at actual factors and cited relevant stats, like their ratings anytime they played on Monday Night Football, including in Week 5, when they played the Philadelphia Eagles. Instead, you do this intentionally misleading poll and try to justify it by saying that you're testing the waters. This is some of the scummiest behavior I've ever seen a station manager try and pull off. He's the puppet master, and he's using the people of Richmond as puppets in this awful plan of his. And as you can probably expect, when the news was announced that Atlanta, not Washington, would be airing on Sunday, oh man, there was outrage around Richmond. Turns out, 48 hours afterwards, there were over 500 calls into WTVR to complain about the decision, flooding the phone lines. Shan said, about 90% made a plea saying, don't dump them because they're losing. Some were stronger than that. I was called various names. Among the outrage included one fan who said, what idiot would do that? Another who summed it up best, saying, there are a lot of Redskins fans around here who follow them win, lose, or draw. For one guy to make an arbitrary decision like that is wrong. The least he could do is take a public opinion poll. And yet, despite all of that, Shan didn't change the game back to Washington, even after he said, I wanted to know what I've got out there, and I have enough response to tell me I have a darn good Washington audience. You got your answer. You got what you wanted and needed to hear. Why are you still leaving the Falcons-Rams game on then? It's not too late to make a switch. This was 3 or so days in advance, and affiliates make switches up until the minute sometimes. I don't know what Shan was going for here. He intentionally conducts a misleading poll, force feeds a team down the throat of the market that the market doesn't want, and when he hears the response, he says, yeah, we hear you, but we're not going to do anything about it this week. I don't get how a man who had been with the station since 1948, when WTVR first signed on the air, and had been there for nearly 3.5 decades, could be this out of touch with his own market. And as you've been watching this whole time, Richmond didn't get to see Washington put on an absolute clinic against Chicago, as they won 24-7 in a game that wasn't even close, as Washington led 24-0 at one point late in the fourth quarter. Granted, the game they got instead with Falcons-Rams was one of the best games of the regular season, as the Rams won 37-35 on a game-winning 25-yard field goal by Frank Corral with about 20 seconds left. So I guess neutral fans were happy, as well as those who didn't really care what game they got as long as it was good. But most of the fans, as in the 4-to-1 ratio that answered and said they wanted to watch Washington play, yeah, they were furious if they couldn't see this game. They were furious if they couldn't see their team pick up their first win of the season while putting on an absolute defensive clinic, as they held Chicago's starting quarterback Vince Evans to a passer rating of 2.3, which is worse than if he did nothing but spike the ball into the ground on every single play. For the record, Evans went 8 for 37 on the day with no touchdowns and 4 incompletions, completing a mere 21.6% of his passes, while the legendary running back Walter Payton got 5 carries for 5 yards. The fact that Richmond wasn't able to watch, for all intents and purposes, their local team play, all because of an absolutely stubborn, incompetent, and somewhat evil station manager, was a giant screw-up. Today, Richmond still remains Washington territory. It's anecdotal evidence, so take that for what it's worth, but I know quite a few people from Richmond, and today, they all root for the Commanders. And today, it's hard to imagine Richmond not getting a Washington game. That is, except for the time in 1981, when one CBS station manager put out a deliberately misleading poll to justify his own conclusion to a messed up test, no matter how false that conclusion actually was. Because on October 11th, 1981, and in the week leading up to that game, HTTR really meant Hate to Television Richmond. Get your official Jaguar Gear 9 merchandise by going to jg9shop.com, and be sure to like this video, ring the notification bell, and subscribe down below if you haven't already, as it helps the channel out a lot. And be sure to check out Twitch every Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern for your chance to play NFL trivia and win cash prizes. Link in the description below. If you want to see videos like this condensed down to 60 seconds, then follow me on TikTok at JaguarGator9. To see college football videos, subscribe to JaguarGator8. To see highlight videos of players throughout the history of the NFL, subscribe to JG9 Highlights. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. See how you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.